Welcome to the lesson on converting fractions, decimals, and percents. You will need a spiral notebook and a simple calculator to complete this lesson. For some of us, this is a review lesson, and for others, it's brand new. So let's take a look at how we convert fractions to decimals and decimals to percents, and vice versa. Take a moment and pause the video. Create this 3-column chart in your notebooks. You might need a page or maybe 2 pages, and you will also need that calculator. You can even use the calculator on your phone. When you're ready, restart the video. In the first column, write down the fraction 1/4. Many of you have the decimal equivalent already memorized. But let's think back. How do we go from a fraction to a decimal? How does that process take place? Well, remember, the bar between 1 and 4 means 1 divided by 4. It represents division. So as we convert from fraction form to decimal form, we're going to divide. So please jot that down on your piece of notebook paper. To go from fraction to decimal form, we divide. You can do it old school and put 1 divided by 4. However, if you have a calculator, simply punch in 1 divided by 4. The 1 goes in first. Take a moment and punch in 1 divided by 4. You should have gotten the decimal equivalent 0.25. Now, as we go from decimal form to percent form, as we discussed before, this is just a reminder, we're going to multiply by 100. Percent means out of 100. So, as we convert to percent form, you're simply going to multiply 0.25 by 100. You can do this on your calculator, but it's a simple little trick that we apply to speed up the process. We know that multiplying by 100 will move the decimal 2 places. The percent that's equivalent is 25%. So 1/4, 0.25, and 25% are all equivalent. How did we get there? First, you divide to convert a fraction to a decimal, and then next, you multiply by 100 to convert a decimal to a percent. Let's try a few more. Once again, some of you may already have these equivalents memorized, but jot this down in the first column. 1/5, 1 out of 5 parts. Grab your phone and remember that bar means division. So you're going to punch in 1 divided by 5. You should have gotten 0.2, 2/10. And in order to convert that decimal to a percent now, you're going to multiply by 100. You can do that on your calculator or simply move the decimal 2 places. We have to add a 0 to hold that last place. So that means as a percent, it's 20%. And the decimal is behind that significant 0. Try this one. In your notebook, please write down 3/4. Pause the video and divide 3 by 4, and then multiply your decimal by 100. Three divided by 4 is 0.75, and when we multiply by 100, we get 75%. Now try this one completely on your own. 3/8, or 3 divided by 8. First convert it to a decimal, then convert it to a percent. Pause the video. You should have gotten 0.375, 375 thousandths. As we multiply by 100 to convert it to a percentage, we see the decimal will only move 2 places. So we get 37.5%. It's a decimal percentage. So far, all of the decimals we've been working with are terminating decimals. But what happens when you get a repeating decimal? Let's take a look. Draw a line in your notes and jot down this fraction, 2/3, or 2 divided by 3. Take a moment and punch that into your calculator. 2 divided by 3 gives us the equivalent decimal of 0.666 repeating. Please write it in expanded form in the center column. As we multiply this by 100, you will see that the decimal moves 2 places, always 2 places, as we multiply by 100. And the result is 66.666, and I'll do ... percent. Now, in order to write that with proper bar notation, you would take and write it this way: 66.6 with a bar over that 6 only percent. Let's take a look at another repeating decimal. Please jot down 1/6, or 1 divided by 6. Punch that into your calculator and convert that to a decimal. You should have gotten 0.1666 repeating, a little bit different than the previous decimal. When you multiply by 100 to convert it to a percent, once again, the decimal will move 2 places when you multiply. Your end result, 16.6666 ... percent, written in expanded form. Written in bar notation, 16.6 with a bar over that 6%. These decimals, as previously discussed, are identified as repeating decimals. So that's how you convert from a fraction to a decimal and then to a percent. Well, let's work backwards. You would think we do the exact opposite as we move backwards, but it's a little different. Turn to a fresh table in your notebook and let's work backwards. Now that you have a fresh chart in front of you, let's recall how this works. As we move from fraction to decimal, of course, we divide. And as we move from decimal to percent, we will multiply by 100. And you would certainly think that if we're moving backwards on the chart, it would be just the opposite. Not quite so. As you move from percent back to decimal, you will divide by 100, moving the decimal point in the opposite direction 2 places. However, as you move from decimal form to fraction form, you would think the opposite of dividing is multiplying, but that's not how this works. You're going to actually read the decimal and create a fraction based on that decimal. Let's take a quick look. For example, if you're given a percentage like 80%, we know the decimal lives behind the 0. As we convert from a percentage to a decimal, we are going to divide by 100. But there's a shortcut. We can just move the decimal 2 places to the left, and we get the decimal equivalent 0.80. Now that 0 is not a significant 0. You can also write it as 0.8. In fact, grab your calculator and punch in 80 divided by 100 and see what you get. Let's take the last step, converting a decimal to a fraction. This is 80 hundredths. As a fraction, you would write it 80 over 100. And this is 8 tenths. As a fraction, you would write 8 tenths. We can simplify both of these fractions. This first fraction, we're going to divide 20 out of each, and it reduces down to 4/5 in simplest form. And in this case, we're going to divide a 2 out of each, which is also equivalent to 4/5. So how did we get there? First, divide by 100, or move the decimal 2 places to the left. And next, read the decimal and create a fraction, whether it's tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Set up a fraction and reduce. Let's try one more. In the last column, write down 4%. And remember, the decimal lives behind the 4. As we convert from percent column to decimal column, we're going to divide by 100, which moves the decimal 2 places. Now we need a 0 in the tenths place. That's a significant 0. It must be there in order to hold the tenths place. It's essential. And as we go from decimal column to fraction column, we read. If you read this, we see that it's 4/100ths. 4/100ths. So write that fraction down and then reduce. In this case, we can factor out a 4 out of the numerator and the denominator, and we get 1 over 25, which is 1/25. 1/25, 4/100ths, and 4% are all equivalent. Now that you know how to convert, take your notes and use them to complete the exit ticket that's been provided. You may also use your calculator and work your problems out in your notebook, and then select the correct answer on the exit ticket. What is that?